Who would have thought that the most silent character hides the deepest secrets in Bikini Bottom? Every major character in Spongebob has kind of been figured out by now. Spongebob's darker side, Plankton's obsession, Squidward's frustration, even Patrick's occasional wisdom. I've picked them all apart and found something real underneath. But Gary is a weird and special character. For everything he's clearly capable of, he's still sitting in Spongebob's living room acting like a harmless pet. Why is that? I've been sitting on this for a while, thinking, what has Gary been planning all along? So I kept digging, and then I found something, hiding in a modern episode that most people probably haven't even watched yet. And once I saw it, I'm pretty convinced Gary's paradox is about to be solved once and for all. We all know that Gary is special, and I still think most people seriously underestimate this snail. And I get it, he meows, he leaves slime trails, he throws tantrums about bath time. On the surface, he looks like he's a pretty normal pet, but then you actually start paying attention every time he appears on the show. In Jellyfish Hunter, there's a scene where the lights go out at SpongeBob's house caused by the pack of jellyfish, and SpongeBob's reaction is just this.
I guess Gary forgot to pay the electric bill.
I guess Gary forgot to pay the electric bill. As in, Gary normally handles that. As SpongeBob says his pet pays the bills like it's the most normal thing in the world. Now, maybe that's a one-off joke, right? Like just a throwaway gag, except the more you look at Gary, the more you realize these throwaway gags keep adding up. He can read in library cards, he can write poetry in Culture Shock, he can cook, he plays Squidward's clarinet better than Squidward does. He can drive a boat through the most dangerous road in Bikini Bottom without a scratch. And when Plankton broke into SpongeBob's house to steal the secret formula in the episode Pineapple Invasion, Gary sets up a kind of Home Alone operation, and he actually won. Then he went right back to eating snail food the moment that SpongeBob came home. Now, aside from the Pineapple Invasion episode, we've seen him outsmart SpongeBob time and time again, like in the episodes Gary Takes a Bath and Gary's Got Legs. And then, after all that happened, SpongeBob said one time that he has been saving up for Gary's college fund, which is sweet, except Gary already pays the household bills. Even if he didn't have it yet, I guess Gary could probably figure that out for himself. So who exactly needs to be saving here? This is one hell of a snail that we're talking about. Things get even more interesting once you compare Gary to basically anyone else in Bikini Bottom. Haven't you noticed that Bikini Bottom is a city full of very loud personalities, both literally and figuratively? Everyone in this city is always trying to prove something to someone. Plankton needs to get the secret recipe, Sandy needs to discover more about life under the sea, Squidward's talents still need to be recognized, even SpongeBob needs to feel needed every now and then. Every sentient creature in the show wants something, and make sure that everyone else knows it. But Gary, I still can't describe what Gary wants to do in the bigger picture. Because think about what Gary actually has. If Plankton had half of what Gary quietly demonstrates on a Tuesday afternoon, he'd have stolen the Krabby Patty formula on day one. And yet, Gary still lets SpongeBob put him on a leash. And that just doesn't make any sense. Now, if you've been watching SpongeBob theory videos for the past few years, you already know there have been some theories to explain this mystery. And, in my opinion, two of them are worth taking seriously. The first one argues that Gary isn't really a snail at all. He is something closer to a cosmic entity. And the evidence starts in Sleepy Time, where Dream Gary describes himself as not being tethered by earthly limitations. Then you connect that to Bubbles the dolphin from the Sponge Out of Water movie, The Interdimensional Guardian. They both share the same intellectual energy. Both are some kind of philosopher, and each of them is someone who could think on a completely different level than anyone else around him, and yet chooses to appear ordinary. The idea being that Gary is somehow connected to that same order of beings as the dolphin, which means he's someone with a cosmic mind trapped in a snail's body. Genuinely fascinating. Now, the second theory is more recent, and it goes in a very, very different direction. This one says Gary is still an alien, just not the space dolphin one. but the same species as the Jellian leader from Planet of the Jellyfish. Again, lots of similarities to compare to. Hidden power, desire to dominate, because in case you forgot, Gary started a pet rebellion in the episode Grooming Gary. Now, this theory finds more proof in the episode Chatterbox Gary. In that episode, SpongeBob bought Gary a talking device for pets so Gary could just talk like a normal fish. And when SpongeBob asks what he dreams about, Gary said this:
I dream I'm flying above it all, while I breathe fiery destruction upon my enemy.
He could actually be planning to destroy humanity or maybe even rule over it. I'm not going to explain every single one because you can just watch them on your own. In short, one theory says a cosmic philosopher with a secret mission, the other says alien revolutionary, especially against pet owners. Both are interesting. Both point to Gary not being what he appears to be. But there's something still bothering me about both theories. I think neither one answers the most important question of all. I mean, if Gary is a supreme being, then what's stopping him? If he could achieve so many things in just that snail form, what is he waiting for? Why is he still sitting on that couch? There's never really anything holding him back, except maybe SpongeBob. Now, this is where it gets genuinely weird. The SpongeBob-Gary relationship is a charming and confusing one. The more you look into it, the less sense it makes. Take Chatterbox Gary. SpongeBob buys a translation collar and suddenly acts like he's hearing Gary speak for the first time. Except in Have You Seen This Snail, SpongeBob could read Gary's goodbye letter, which was in snail cursive.
These last few years have been some of the best of my life, but I must move on.
So he can read Gary's handwriting, but can't understand him talking? Then there's the driving thing. SpongeBob has spent the entire show failing his boating exam over and over again. Mrs. Puff has basically given up on him at this point. And Gary, his pet, has a license and drives better than most people in Bikini Bottom. Now SpongeBob knows this and never once thought to ask for lessons? Come on.
Now go! Attaboy!
Not to mention, there's never really a conversation about how Gary has hands and legs. He showed that he has a hand to make gestures in the middle of his riot speech in Grooming Gary. In Your Shoes Untied, we saw Gary always wear shoes and is even capable of tying them up himself. This also probably explains why he could ride a unicycle at the end of the boating school episode. But of course, the biggest tell of all is the fact that SpongeBob sees Gary do extraordinary things on a daily basis and just accepts it. I mean, we've got a whole episode named Treats to basically showcase what Gary is capable of doing when he actually wants to learn or do it. He can skydive, jump through a ring of fire with a bike, and even go bowling. I mean, SpongeBob couldn't teach some of those things. Gary has to learn it himself. I mean, at some point, you just gotta ask, hey Gary, how'd you do that? But no, yeah, that's my pet. For someone who has genuine moments of brilliance, SpongeBob has a very specific blind spot. And it's always Gary, which made me start wondering, is SpongeBob actually oblivious? Or is he just choosing to not look too closely? So at this point, I am so deep into this thought, I am desperate to search for anything that could explain more about the relationship. And that's when I started digging into how they actually met in the first place, which turned out to be another kind of problem entirely. Let me ask you this, how did SpongeBob and Gary meet? It's a simple question to some of you, except the show itself can't seem to agree on the answer. In Have You Seen This Snail, there's a flashback showing SpongeBob had Gary since he was a little kid as his childhood pet. Gary's only the size of SpongeBob's hand in that picture, which means they grew up together.
More than a pet, you're my best friend, too cool to forget, come back 'cause we...
But then, in Plankton's Pet, SpongeBob casually mentions he adopted Gary from the animal shelter.
You should try the local animal shelter. That's where I found my Gary.
Oh, yeah?
Then Camp Coral and Sponge on the Run come along. They first met at summer camp when SpongeBob was 10 years old. Gary wandered in to get some food, and in just a short time, they bonded. Then SpongeBob would adopt him later when he was older.
What's your name? Gary, huh?
Now look, SpongeBob has continuity errors. Every long-running cartoon does. Most of the time, it's just different writers not keeping track. But it's not something minor like what color a character's shirt was in Season 2. This is the origin story of arguably SpongeBob's closest relationship in the entire show. And the show can't tell the same story twice, which made me think, what if it's not the writers who are confused? What if it's SpongeBob? Because there's something else hiding in Gary's name that nobody has ever really checked. His full name. Gerald Gareth Wilson Jr. Yep. In case you didn't know, Gary is just a short abbreviation for Gareth or Gerald in his real name. And apparently, this is known by Patrick too. He did call Gary his real name one time.
Howdy, Patrick.
Hey, SpongeBob. Gareth.
Speaking of names, to some of you that might not be familiar with what the junior naming system is, it's basically given to a son most of the time because they have the same name as their father, which means there has to be a senior in this lineage, which also means Gerald Gareth Wilson Sr. existed somewhere in this story. But here's where it gets confusing. We all know Gary's father is Sluggo Star. That's confirmed in the show's Family Tree episode, Rule of Dumb. There's no Gareth or Wilson to his name. That's the whole reason Gary has a royal lineage. It also means Patrick is his long-lost cousin, but more on that later. So where does the Wilson name come from? Because I'm not sure there's anyone else named Wilson in the show. And that's the detail that cracked this whole thing open for me. Because what if the few different origin stories aren't a continuity error at all? What if SpongeBob met Gary twice? Or at least twice, I should say. Gary Wilson Sr. is the one from childhood and Camp Coral, the one SpongeBob grew up with. And then at some point, for whatever reason, the senior was gone, and SpongeBob, quietly, without ever fully processing it, walked into a shelter and came home with Gary Wilson Jr. Both names close enough that SpongeBob never had to admit what actually happened. Which brings me to the season 16 episode that solves this whole paradox about Gary called Pardon My Wand. In Pardon My Wand, SpongeBob and Sandy go through a magic show, and SpongeBob gets a hold of the very magic wand wielded by the magician. Through some unlucky events, that can transform anything into anything else. And at one point, he accidentally turns Gary into an old man.
Old Man Walker? What are you doing here?
And not just any old man either, Old Man Walker. Except Bikini Bottom already has Old Man Walker, the guy who shows up in the background constantly with a crutch, just always walking. So unremarkable that nobody ever questions why he's always just there. Until the end of the episode, SpongeBob never really turned Gary back into a snail. He did get a hold of the magic wand again, but we never saw him turn Gary back. Now, go back to Sleepy Time in Season 1. Right in Gary's dream sequence, Philosopher Gary tells SpongeBob something.
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations.
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations. And everyone naturally assumed he was talking about the concept of dreams, where you could basically get anything you want. But what if he was talking about himself? What if Gary Wilson Sr. found a way out of his earthly limitation? Since now he has the body of Old Man Walker, who is a fish, he's no longer in his snail body. I'm pretty sure he could talk properly after taking some time to learn. And it wouldn't surprise me if he decided to leave not long after that. And then, after going through a time of despair, SpongeBob found Gary Wilson Jr., and that basically took his place, continuing whatever the original Gary had started, which would explain everything. Now, I know some of you will call this outright crazy, and I kind of agree. We've seen Old Man Walker himself talk throughout different episodes. There's also a scene where we could see both Walker and Gary in the same frame, like in Once Bitten. But that could just mean there's two Old Man Walkers in this city, because even though Walker got a bit of camera time in the show, more often than not, we only saw him as a mute background character. How do you know it's the real Old Man Walker? It could be just Gary Sr. And so SpongeBob's inconsistent origin stories were made up because he genuinely met two different Garys at two different points in his life, and somehow along the way stopped being able to tell the story straight. As for SpongeBob's specific blind spot around Gary's intelligence, I think it happened because on some level, he already knows something is different. He just can't bring himself to look directly at it, because that would only remind him of the pain of losing Gary. So he assured himself it's better to know less about it. And Old Man Walker's inexplicable screen time for a background character, because he's not really a background character after all. He's the original Gary, watching from across the street, going on his daily walk. Gary told us back in Season 1 that earthly limitations don't have to be permanent. Turns out, he meant it literally. And honestly, this changes everything we thought we knew about Gary. The fact that the smartest creature in Bikini Bottom has been living a double life this whole time, and the one person who could have figured it out chose not to because of the pain, which actually makes SpongeBob's relationship with Gary the most quietly complicated one in the entire show. More than SpongeBob and Patrick or Squidward, because at least Patrick and Squidward are exactly who they appear to be. Gary is indeed a smart creature. And speaking of the smartest creature in Bikini Bottom, if you want to know exactly where Gary ranks against every other character in the show, I already broke that down in full. Every character, 7 levels, some placements are going to genuinely surprise you. That video is right here, go watch it next. And I'll see you on the next dive.